He taught IT at a Welsh college. He ran a £900,000 cocaine laboratory. This is how an ordinary teacher became a major league drug supplier. Macphallen Kuwale was a respected IT teacher, teaching IT at a Welsh college in Bridgend, South Wales. He spent his weekdays surrounded by computers, code and curious students. To anyone looking in, he was a hard-working educator, professional, intelligent and calm. He was the kind of teacher that parents trusted, the kind who stayed late to help with coursework and spoke to his students about building a future. But behind the calm surface, something darker was brewing. On paper, his life was steady. His salary, around £38,000 a year, was perfectly ordinary for his role. He had a routine, a reputation and a respectable place in the community. But Kuwale wanted more money, more control, more excitement. And that desire, somewhere around 2012 or 2013, led him down a path that would eventually destroy everything he'd built. At first, it was just small-time dealing, a bit of side money. But like many who enter that world, he didn't stop there. He was clever, organised and methodical. And soon the teacher became a manufacturer. He started producing cocaine, not just packaging it, but pressing it and cutting it in ways that suggested training, precision and planning. It was a far cry from the classroom. By day he taught computer security, but by night he used those same digital skills to hide his growing empire. Encrypted messages, carefully managed contacts and cash-only transactions. 2 lives but 1 man, and for a time he managed to keep the 2 worlds perfectly separate. The police would later describe his setup as one of the most sophisticated small-scale cocaine labs they'd seen in South Wales. This wasn't someone mixing powder in a kitchen sink. Kuwale's operation was professional, the kind of setup you might see in a chemistry lab, with scales, mixing tools and an industrial-grade pressing machine. That pressing machine told detectives everything that they needed to know. You don't buy one of those unless you intend to produce serious quantities. It's not for personal use, it's for business. Cocaine was mixed with cutting agents to increase volume, pressed into dense blocks and packaged for sale. Each block was worth thousands of pounds on the street. And it wasn't random. Kuwale had built what detectives later described as a complete supply chain. He had contacts, a customer base and people who helped move product. In a twisted way, it worked like any other business. Street-level sales for quick cash. Risky, but profitable. Wholesale deals with other dealers. Safer, larger transactions that fed the bigger picture. The same logic that made him good at IT also made him good at crime. Planning, analysis and problem solving. He even used encrypted messaging and digital tracking to manage orders and payments, applying his classroom lessons to his illegal trade. Technology, once his tool for teaching, had become his weapon for deception. The profits rolled in, enough to keep up appearances, to enjoy life a little more comfortably. A few nicer things here and there, but never enough to draw suspicion. He still went to work every day, still taught his students, and still smiled in the staff room. But beneath that normal surface, the money was dirty and the risk was growing. Because while he thought his digital skills could cover his tracks, he underestimated one thing: the patience of the South Wales Police. In 2013, South Wales Police began investigating cocaine distribution across Bridgend and Cardiff. They weren't looking for a teacher, not at first anyway. They were chasing the drugs and tracing the flow of supply. Gradually, their surveillance began to reveal a name that didn't seem to fit the pattern. A man with no criminal record, a teacher with a full-time job. It didn't make sense until they looked closer. They began following Kuwale's movements, monitoring his communications and piecing together his network. The digital trails he thought were hidden began to light up. The bank deposits, the coded messages, the contacts who had no business knowing an IT lecturer. The police built their case carefully. And then came the moment that every criminal fears, the knock on the door. When officers executed the search warrant, they found everything they'd hoped for, and more. Inside the property was a complete cocaine laboratory, a pressing machine, cutting agents and mixing equipment. Also 111 grams of pure cocaine plus another £8,000 worth of processed drugs ready to sell. They found ledgers, notes and evidence of large-scale operations. Altogether, the potential value of the materials and the products was close to £900,000. It was an extraordinary discovery and a shocking one for the community. Macphallen Kuwale, the man trusted to educate young people, was running a drug production business from his own home. The press soon caught wind of it. Local headlines in Wales called him the Breaking Bad teacher, a reference to the hit TV show about a chemistry teacher who turns to meth production. But this wasn't fiction, this was Bridgend, and it was very, very real. News of Kuwale's arrest sent ripples through the school and the wider town. Parents couldn't believe it, students were stunned, and staff members who worked beside him were totally blindsided. He wasn't a troublemaker or a loud personality. In fact, he was the quiet one, polite, punctual and professional. In early 2014, the case went before Cardiff Crown Court. The evidence was overwhelming. Photographs of the lab, the pressing machine, the bags of cocaine, and also the financial records. All of it pointed to the same conclusion. This was not for personal use. This was a full-scale production operation. The defence had little to offer. Kuwale was a first-time offender, but the judge made it clear this was a grave abuse of trust. A teacher occupies a position of respect and responsibility, and when someone in that position chooses to profit from drugs, it damages not only lives, but the credibility of the entire profession. The prosecution described him as heavily involved in the supply of cocaine, operating at both the street level and wholesale levels. The judge agreed. In March 2014, Macphallen Kuwale was sentenced to 3.5 years in prison for possession of cocaine with intent to supply. The court heard how the lab could have produced drugs worth hundreds of thousands of pounds, a setup more ambitious than most small-time dealers could imagine. Newspapers across the UK picked up the story: The Telegraph, ITV and The Guardian. They all ran versions of the same headline: Real-life Breaking Bad teacher jailed after £900,000 cocaine lab discovered. The comparison stuck, but unlike the show's anti-hero, there was nothing glamorous about Kuwale's downfall. There were no millions in offshore accounts, no cartel connections, no empire left behind, just a prison cell and a shattered reputation. Macphallen Kuwale, from classroom to crime lord to convicted criminal. It's a story that shows how far ambition can fall when integrity is lost, and how one man's double life became one of Wales' most shocking betrayals of trust. This is what happens when trust is broken and lines are crossed. Thanks for watching this week's episode of True Crime Documentaries UK. Please subscribe, like and hit the notification bell for future episodes. It really helps the channel grow. Until the next one, stay safe.